Join us, won't you, as we attempt to conjure the spirit of Hunter S. Thompson and gonzo journalism tonight on Volume 2, Chapter 8 of BookTalk.
Gee, Vince, what kind of dummy wouldn't know how to use a child safety seat?
Beats me, lad. It's child's play.
You just buckle him in.
Unless he's over 20 pounds.
Then this one's good.
Except if he's over 40 pounds.
Then you're into this kind of rig.
What if he outgrows that?
Put him in a booster seat?
What if he's too big for the booster seat?
Would he use the safety belt?
The Auto Safety Hotline can tell you everything you need to know about keeping your child safe in a car.
I'm a wreck.
Totaled.
You could learn a lot from a dummy. Call 1-800-424-9393.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, John Robarts, and this is Book Talk. Tonight, with our guest, Chad Straley, better known to his friends and neighbors as Azron.
Good evening, sir.
We're, among other things, going to talk about the late Hunter S. Thompson. Well, he certainly was a major force in American journalism. And of course,
he helped define the 60s, to say the very least.
Right. And using the word journalism in context with Thompson, I think, in my opinion, is a bit of a stretch because the books that he wrote were a whole different form. It actually created a new genre.
Yeah, gonzo journalism. It blended
gonzo.
Both the best of fictional and commentary as well as opinion all in the same genre and with an ongoing storyline.
And for those who may not have read him, the actual base concept of gonzo journalism was for the author to include himself in the story. And probably I should back up a little bit and talk about the concept of journalism itself first. And journalism, as opposed to being a fictional author, is the art of telling a story as it happened. In other words, like Robert Heinlein said in Stranger in a Strange Land, the art of being a fair witness. Someone who can describe events, describe, characters, describe things that have happened accurately. Journalism is reporting, is telling a story, not inventing something, not
Defining an event.
Right.
There is absolutely no use for fiction within journalism.
Right. And what he did was to actually involve himself in the story that he was trying to tell, to become part of the story. And he never hesitated to wander off into fiction in the middle of some story, and was absolutely acclaimed for it. Though, my opinion is, I think it really went a little bit too far.
I don't know, but it added much more color than some. A lot of the journalism can be so drab. Today in the news, we have such and such, X people, this, that, whatever. He brought things to life. Mm-hmm. Very vivid imagination. Again, granted, it could have been the booze, but
right.
He was notorious and legendary for a lot of his antics, eccentric behavior, and etc. But all of that developed a story like very few authors have been able to accomplish.
True.
Fear and Loathing in the Campaign Trail in '72.
Yeah, which we have a copy of.
Managed to make politics interesting to a lot of young people, just because he was showing that he was having fun within it as well.
But see, there we get into something
he used humor.
Yep.
And got people laughing, which turned on a lot of attention.
But we have to get into something, and this is really the point I wanted to get into. Going back through the history of journalism, all the way back to, say, the 1600s, 1700s, it's a journalist's responsibility, in my opinion, to remain objective. And if you're writing an editorial piece and you're saying, well, things should be this way, then that's an editorial piece. Journalism is, these are the facts, you decide, And so much of what has been written historically, there was even a term for it, which was coined, I believe, in the 1700s, called yellow journalism. And there were a lot of papers at the time period, particularly like during the American Revolution, that took the British point of view, and they wrote in a manner which was incendiary, a manner which was designed to tell the people what to think. And in my opinion, that's not a good thing. That's a bad thing, because journalism should be about the facts, and editorialism should be about, well, I think you should believe this. And there needs to be, and let me go on for just a minute before I let you in, there needs to be a real good separation in that line, okay? And Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, now I read this not very long after it was written. He just so brutally hated Richard Nixon.
Yes.
That he lost sight, in my opinion, of a lot of the reality of what was going on. Now, the book is wonderful, and it's absolutely worth a read. But, boy, if you start to believe some of the philosophy he's throwing at you, I think you're going to be sinking your boat real quick.
Well, he took sarcasm to an extreme.
Way to an extreme. way to an extreme. But
what I was going to say with what you were talking about with journalism, agreed. Journalism should be objective, reporting the facts as is. What you're describing isn't so much journalism as much as is historical record, which is, again, we're down to perspective.
Now, see, it isn't the job of a journalist to tell you what to think.
No, I agree.
And boy, and this is a good example. Now, his earlier book, and right off the top of my head, I don't remember the precise title. He had a couple of novels that he tried to get published and was turned down by every publisher, and finally
The Rum Diary just recently came out.
The Rum Diary was finally published. He said he turned to journalism because he failed as a novelist. But he wrote a book about the Hells Angels. And he actually got involved with them and began to, here it is, the title was Hells Angels, The Strange and Terrible Saga of the Outlaw Motorcycle Gangs. That was in 1966.
Yep. Got savagely beaten.
Got beaten by them, right. But he tried to become part of them. Of course, he wasn't smart enough to actually ride a Harley. He had a BSA, which is like, a big mistake right off the bat. But
he was one of the few journalists that was actually respected and accepted by the Hells Angels, at least to my knowledge, at least from my understanding of what I've read.
Until the point where they realized that he was going to be making money off of it. And of course, when he decided not to share the money, they got a little rough. But, and I actually did read that. And I see, when did I read that? Would have been 1969, during my senior year in high school. And that was really the book where he began the whole concept of gonzo journalism. He hadn't really fully arrived at it, but he had begun to express that sort of outlook. And it found its full fruition in Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, which, to be honest with you, I've only read portions of it. And it's very well written strictly from a literary standpoint, from the standpoint of use of language and structure and so on. It has a little bit of an existential feel, kind of an acid trip feel, sort of, and that's kind of how he writes. If you saw...
Yes, I'm well aware of that.
The next book, the book a little further down, was Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and that's really the one that...
no, that's the one the population currently
out.
knows him the best
Right.
of. Johnny Depp, when he did an outstanding job portraying Mr. Thompson, that movie, it was... I don't know how to describe. I really enjoyed it. It was really entertaining, but I liked the first half. Once they got to the second hotel, I could have cared less. I could have shut the movie off at that point.
I know.
Because
I remember leaving the theater thinking I needed a shower.
it was like the first half. It was really entertaining. It was, there was all the motocross going on. What was going on between him and Gonzo, the Samoan, and after they ran through the first hotel and got into the second, then it became about two guys doing drugs and doing them badly.
Oh, right, exactly, and not really so much anymore about the story.
Exactly.
And all of that in Thompson's writing was an effort to illustrate his ideas about life and about philosophy and so on.
The constant degradation, increasing degradation, I should say.
And to be perfectly honest with you, in my opinion, that kind of writing contributes to it. That slow Western decline, so to speak. As our society more and more seems to follow the path of Roman society. Well, we'll let down this little bit of social structure here. We'll give up these manners. We'll just compromise this moral, but we won't lose all of our morals. We'll just compromise this one. And it's a philosophical example, in my opinion, of the old Arabian proverb of the camel's nose. You know that one, don't you?
That I do not know.
Well, I'll give it to you in the audience because you see so much of this happening, particularly in the tax structure right here in Pinellas County. The Bedouin, he's out in the desert, and it's time to go to sleep, so he's in his tent, and it's a cold night. He's sleeping in his tent, and the camel, of course, sleeping outside. So the camel says, "Can't I come in the tent too?" And the Bedouin says, "Well, no, this is my tent." "Well, can't I just stick my nose in?" Well, all right, you can stick your nose in, and so the nose gets warm, and of course a few minutes go by. Well, can't I put my ears in? Well, no, you can't put your ears in. There's not room in here for both of us. So pretty soon he gives in, though, and the ears are in. Well, it isn't too long till the Bedouin's sleeping outside in the cold, and the camel's inside the tent. And that's just a philosophical, examination of how things decline. If you let in a little bit, where does it go? And I think the state of journalism right now is pretty well exemplified by that little parable there. And it's going downhill. And a really good example is, which we satired here as Dan Blather, the recent retirement of the CBS news anchor.
Right.
And I want to briefly mention, before we come to the end of our segment time, a couple other books. This one has done very well, too. It's Hunter S. Thompson's The Great Shark Hunt, The Gonzo Papers, Volume 1. And this is just kind of a collection of different
letters and correspondences.
Essays, And the other one, Hunter S. Thompson's The Proud Highway, The Fear and Loathing Letters, Volume 1, which are the actual letters he wrote to a lot of different notables.
The politicians.
Politicians, yeah, and his wife and so on. And they're also...
I thought it was real funny what he did with Jimmy Carter. There and he trashed him, hounded him, harassed him, harangued him, and just when he was about ready to get thrown out of everything, he asked him for a job.
Right. I mean, the guy was definitely brilliant. There are some questions about his suicide, whether it really was or not, about the circumstances of it. I suspect it probably was an actual suicide and not a murder, as the internet has been speculating.
In this day and age, any celebrity that goes down untimely, there's questionability about it. But I think that's actually good. It means everyone's not just taking things as they come. They're looking into it more.
Well, I suspect as an author and as a writer, he probably looked up to Ernest Hemingway and wanted to follow his example. But anyway, that'll do it for our first segment. And at this point, we're going to stop and insert a bookmark. And we'd like to ask you not to touch that remote. And stay tuned for a little more Book Talk.
Turn the world on with a smile. Well, it's you, girl, and you should know it. Love is all around, why don't you take it? The best way out is by coming in. Going to family learning programs helps you and your family lead better lives. Call 1-877-FAMLIT-1 because making it, after all, shouldn't just happen on TV.
Life to be a good dad. You just need to spend time with your kids. It takes a man to be a dad.
And welcome back to Book Talk. Well, Thompson is certainly an interesting subject, and we could probably spend days and days talking about that whole subject.
It is unfortunate that he is gone, yes.
Yep. But those of you who saw our show last month, remember we talked about some very interesting cosmological phenomena, and a particular author, Zecharia Sitchin.
Correct.
And once again, that's a subject that we couldn't cover in 30 minutes. It would take us, maybe a year of 30-minute shows to even really get deeply into it. But we want to back up a little bit and talk about it some more because they're very interesting things.
I wanted to do a follow-up. One of the things that I wasn't able to really go into, and it's a good example using like the gonzo journalist and seeing exactly how far journalism can run forward. The things that Zecharia Sitchin has defined through the cuneiform tablets from back in ancient Mesopotamia and Babylon revolve around what he calls the 12th planets. The ancient Sumerians also defined the moon and the sun as a planet, and that there's an additional one coming, and that is Nibiru. There have been a whole bunch of sensationalists that have created what has become known as Planet X.
And a whole web net phenomena
began of basically every society, every civilization's had it. It's the doomsayers,
Right.
And this is one that for the longest time that I happened to believe. It seemed to match up a lot of different variations, including a lot of the prophecies mentioned in the Bible.
But it's so easy just to take it too far.
Agreed.
So many people will just believe anything they see on the net, believe anything they hear Dan Blather spout.
Agreed. If there is an end of world scenario, that means just that, the end of the world. There's nothing that one can do about it. Should the event take place, why stress about it? It's only going to sacrifice your life and how you live it now.
But in Sitchin's works, he's actually stated that the mathematics the astronomical mathematics of the Mayans and of the Sumerians in particular are pretty ironclad. And I haven't seen any good refutation. Or no
one has been able to refute any of the claims that Sitchin has made. But he's also played the game very, very well. Mm-hmm. The only time he's actually, when Mark Hazelwood and Zeta Talk all started doing this May 23rd of 2003, came out of the woodwork, the only real statement that he made was that he has not been able to define any point or any confirmation of the time that the planet, he has not been able to figure out where Nibiru is on the orbit.
Well, exactly. If you could nail that down, and once again, it comes to how much computing power we have available to crunch the numbers, we could turn Hubble. And of course, and I have to digress a little bit. And, Book Talk is all about digression because, there's just so much to talk about. And briefly talk about the space program because, in my humble opinion, the space program is the only thing in life right now that matters. I mean, there'll be a lot of people out there going to argue with me about it. But if this planet shows up and smashes ours to smithereens, okay, if we haven't evolved into a spacefaring civilization, then we're done. I mean, we're done someday anyway, not necessarily because of pollution here on Earth, but because someday the sun will burn out. Well, it probably won't be tomorrow.
No. An interesting notion, though, is that every species on this planet has a function, okay? Mm-hmm. The mosquitoes fly around, then you have gnats eat that, you have the frogs eat all of those, they could kind of an everlasting food chain. We are at the top of that food chain as far as we know it, and since the dinosaurs disappeared, which I presume they'd be on the higher up than we are. But
anyway,
we have no biological ecostructural purpose other than building machines. And a friend of ours, Ken, turned me into what he called at one point a church of animism. Mm-hmm. And I've read his papers, although I don't think the term church would be appropriate to use. I think he had a very valid point. What if the Earth does want to breed? We are the only species that can carry the Earth outside of its finite ecosphere.
Precisely.
And that I bring more of a concept to ponder. The other one of the things with Zecharia Sitchin that's really important to understand is Zecharia Sitchin has always been more interested in the astronomical and the cosmological aspect of everything that he's interpreted. Right. Theological and religious aspects are something that he has left to other people. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he wanted the bulldogs to tear him down. I think he wanted people to explore the knowledge and learn for themselves, and then make whatever adjustments that they need to.
Well, see, I need to jump in right there because we're seeing a phenomena in our society which troubles me very, very deeply. And while on the one hand, I fully support the people's right to believe in whatever religion you feel you need to believe in. Our country is founded upon religious freedom, and, go ahead. But at the same token, I think I see a phenomena of oppression coming out of the extreme religious right, seeking to attack people like Zecharia Sitchin, to attack the whole concept of science itself, trying to push creationism. Okay, maybe God did create us. Okay, but that doesn't mean he did it in 6 days. Just because the Bible says so. Well, the Bible's been rewritten how many times? And
it's not been rewritten, but it's been reinterpreted.
Exactly. Because the written is the original books, and interpretations are the printings we have today.
Well, I'm one of those odd few. I'm neither a believer of the creationist theory nor an evolutionist. I believe that they're both right.
Well, they could work together.
Evolution has taken everything to a certain part. It's a natural progression. We have seen this in every aspect of lives. However, the starting point seems to be the big issue. But what if there was a catalyst, an interim, that jump-started things?
It has to be a prime mover, something that started. But, you see phenomena like NASA deciding to abandon Hubble, which has been the most productive tool to solve these questions that mankind has ever created. Now here we are, all of a sudden we've got an administration that's going to make noises about sending a man to Mars, and at the same time turn around and throw away this absolutely essential, valuable tool. A tool that with the resolution to determine whether planet X exists, a tool with the resolution to tell us more and more about the creation of the universe, about what's happening with the Big Bang Theory and all of that, and here we are, we're getting ready to throw it away. You know, billions of dollars invested, it's still got another 10 years of life left in it with a little bit of service, but NASA decided, well, we just don't need it. And I don't think that's because of the scientists at NASA, because I know some of them. I don't think it's because of the scientists in most of the academic circles, because I know a few of them too. I know it's not space enthusiasts. I know a lot of them, you know.
No, they've become the forefront of the conspiracy frontier.
But I see it coming out of that extreme, right-wing, restrictive, religious movement in our country. And I think that there are those who want to see us brought back to the same theocracy that existed during the Middle Ages, after the fall of the Western civilization, at the fall of Rome.
In a movie called A Few Good Men, Jack Nicholson had an astounding line of, "You can't handle the truth."
Oh, amen.
I think it's the powers that be that can't handle the truth, and they are so desperately afraid that people will find it.
Right.
And they will suddenly realize that people don't need them as much as they think,
Exactly.
and that there would be a lot of lives be much more beneficial if things were reduced.
Right.
But again, George Orwell was off by a few years, but he was certainly right on about what was happening.
Well, I don't know if he was as off as people think he is. I think that, you know, because of his writings and so on, the ruling elite may have more or less gotten wise and decided not to be quite so blatant about it. Now, my former co-host was a firm believer in Illuminati and that they're controlling the world, they're running everything. Well, I'm not fully convinced of that. I think it's human nature that any of these big organizations like the Bilderbergers, the Trilaterals, they're all going to be at each other's throats. And I don't see them all working as one unified force to control our lives. There's
irony-
some of that, you know.
The funny irony is that it's ludicrous to believe that someone, or there could be some group that could actually focus that calculatingly to slowly guide and manipulate everything. But by the same strange circumstances, it's ludicrous to assume that someone can't. We are victims of habit. We are victims of pattern. You know, it's the same Ohm's law reversed with economics.
Right.
You know, which is a mathematical, physical reality that it'll apply to society just as much as it applies to physics or electronics.
Of course, that, once again, I want to diverge a little bit, and you get into It's a Beautiful Mind, and Robert Nash, who got a Nobel Prize for his work in economics. We're reducing economics to a simple equation, and and Greenspan and the Fed are using that equation today to manipulate our economy and so on. But that's another show. And
it just makes you wonder exactly how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Well, right, exactly. And here we are with the technology now to prove some of Zecharia Sitchin's premises.
Yes.
You know, and we can't seem to get the powers that be off their rump and go out there and tell us the truth. I've always been of the opinion that belief is the first symptom of insanity. And people have asked me, you know, well, what do you mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is I don't believe in anything. I don't disbelieve in anything. I know some things. There's an awful lot of stuff I don't know. And trying to find where that line is of course, the science of philosophy, is the art of philosophy. You know, the only thing that you know are the things that have been forged by the hammer of science on the anvil of truth. And those hard kernels that are left over is reality. You know, and there are darn few things in our world that are so reduced. And it's the quest for that particular truth, that distillation of truth, that can lead us out of this hole, so to speak, help us find the truth, find out, do we have an incoming 12th planet? Are we ever going to get off our home and travel out there? And we're going to survive in the long run as a species? Or are we doomed to just sit here and watch the internet and watch BookTalk and...
Time will inevitably tell.
Right.
Philosophers often state as I think, therefore I am. Between Nintendo, umpteen cable stations, movies, and umpteen other thousand ways, none of which, the least of which being the internet, we don't think anymore.
Right.
Therefore, we're not. That in itself makes you think.
Well, if you look back at how society in Western Europe existed during the Middle Ages, during the Dark Ages, and how repressive and how difficult it was for ideas to form, you look at the persecution later on of Galileo, persecution of Copernicus, Kepler, all of these great minds, and you think in the context of that, and you think about what's happening in our society today, and it's a very, very scary thing. Someone like Zecharia Sitchin has obviously done his homework. He's worked very carefully to lay down his premises, become so vilified in the media, so attacked by pseudo-scholars, so attacked by pseudo-journalists, and it could lead us down a path that's very bad. We probably would not have the wonderful Western society we have today if it wasn't for the plague. The plague in the 1300s, the Great Black Plague, destroyed a third of the population of Western Europe.
Yes.
Another third was destroyed by the ensuing social chaos and redistribution of wealth as a result of that plague. And the sudden rebirth, the Renaissance, was a result of that social upheaval, allowing people access to funds, access to information in particular, allowing books out of Islam, in particular, where much knowledge had been preserved, back into Europe, where reading became a little bit more accepted, where education became much more accepted, and the whole development of science and literature and art, that whole springing forward was a result of that huge upheaval.
Correct.
And hopefully we can achieve some of those same results without that drastic an upheaval. But without some type of renaissance, without some type of sociological awakening, I feel this other force may be trying to head us back down that medieval.
The one thing one thing that can be said about tragedies, and it will continue to be this way in life so long as this is in play. The one really wonderful thing about tragedies is it enables us to show our humanity.
Indeed.
And we are not going to, until we can show our humanity without the need of chaos and horrible evils, I hate to use that word, but horrible evils, it will always be that way.
Right. Well, we're coming up to the end of our time, and I'm going to throw one book real quick. It's Plato in 90 seconds. Folks, it was all his fault. But we want you to come back again sometime, real soon, and enjoy some more Book Talk.